Welcome back to End is the Future, a podcast that brings together great minds to address the opportunities and challenges of making businesses both sustainable and profitable. I am Ilham Kadri, and I'm delighted to be your host today. If you are as passionate about sustainable business as I am, let's explore how End is the Future together. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking with Jean-Pascal van Ypersele, who is one of the world's top climatologists and the former vice chair of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He is a professor of climate and environmental sciences and co-director of the specialized Master in Science and Management of the Environment at the Université Catholique de Louvain, UCL. Jean-Pascal's passion for science started early. When he was a boy, he built a telescope out of a gutter scraps and eyeglasses lenses, believe it or not, that he got from opticians' offices. He quickly became interested in climate science, and at the age of 22, he attended the very first World Climate Conference in Geneva in 1979. Later, at the IPCC meeting in Madrid in 1995, he contributed to a sentence, and famous one, in the IPCC annals that states, "The balance of evidence suggests that there is a discernible human influence on global climate." And he was so right. So he has truly been at the very heart of some of the most influential scientific research. I was lucky enough to meet Jean-Pascal a few weeks ago at a special dinner. I have always been fascinated by his work. I lived in Belgium. His name is all around. He's very famous. And I said, you must come on my podcast. I'm really looking forward to hearing his thoughts about how businesses can make a difference as we strive to achieve the end, A&D, that is to be both sustainable and profitable. Jean-Pascal, thank you so much for being here today.
You're most welcome, and it's a pleasure and an honor.
So, Jean-Pascal, in this podcast, we really want to discuss the important role of businesses, right? And the businesses can play in the fight against climate change. But before we get to that, as a scientist myself, I'm deeply interested in your research and your relationship with science. I want to start by simply asking you, is there a moment, Jean-Pascal, in your life, like an aha moment, right? Very authentic, very simple, that really made you passionate about climate science and climate action?
Yeah, it's a hard question. So my initial answer, is every day. I mean, I have such a passion for the subject that every day I find something that is really interesting happening around climate change, whether it's while reading a newspaper or reading a scientific article or talking to colleagues or talking sometimes to victims of effects of climate change.
That little boy, Jean-Pascal, I mean, building a telescope, you were already in love with science from day one, right?
Yeah, that's right. I was in love with science. That's true. I had a passion for astronomy, but the passion was transformed into a passion for our planets a little later when I was studying physics at the Université Catholique de Louvain here. And I realized that I was as interested by the space and the stars and the astronomy as by human issues and issues related to development, human development at the surface of this planet. And I learned about a research group that was starting, or which had started a few years before, starting to do climate modeling to study past climates, but also looking at future climate and the influence of CO2 emissions on future climate. And I was about to leave for Liège, the University of Liège, to study astrophysics. And then I decided, well, if I do climate science, if I specialize in climate science, I will be able to combine my interest for astronomy and physics and my interest for human issues. So that's why I stayed in Louvain-la-Neuve and became a climate modeler.
Yeah, that's great. That's the North Star. And you have been, in fact, actively involved in many IPCC reports, right, Jean-Pascal? After the latest report was published, the UN Secretary General said it provided a code red warning for humanity. And it was also a bit alarming to read that some effects of climate change are now irreversible. But there seem to be a lot of reasons for hope, certainly from a scientific point of view. Can you tell us a bit more about the science behind these findings?
Well, the fact that the IPCC reports a red warning, I mean, I wouldn't say it's only the last one. It was severe warnings before as well. And even if you take the very first IPCC report, even before I became involved in IPCC, if you read the 1990 report, the very first IPCC report, you see that the warnings it contained about the changes, the significant changes in the inhabitability of the planet were present in that report already. So we have been warned for a long time that if we continue to emit so much greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, CO2 in particular, which has a big default, and that it's invisible. Of course, it's also a heat-trapping gas, a greenhouse gas, but maybe the fact that it's invisible is another big default, because we don't realize the huge amounts of CO2 we emit in the atmosphere, and we are really changing the composition of that atmosphere. We have increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere since the pre-industrial time by 50%, basically. So if we have thickened the thermal insulation layer that we have around the planet, and obviously under that insulation layer, it becomes warmer. And of course, we can adapt to a warmer climate up to a point. There have been, over the last 10,000 years, climate fluctuations of about +1 or ±1 degree Celsius on the average. But we are heading, if we don't really change our development pattern, we are heading towards several degrees, actually. I don't believe those numbers that were quoted during Glasgow. I think they are very optimistic, saying that in Glasgow we put the word on 2.7 or 1.8 or 1.I degrees C. I don't believe in those numbers. They are based on very optimistic hypotheses. But still, that being said, the IPCC doesn't only diagnose the problem; it also assesses the many solutions that exist. There are many solutions in each sector of human activity, actually, and that's one of the reasons for hope. Actually, is that we know on paper at least what the solutions are, and many of those solutions are in the hands of business, actually.
Yeah. And indeed, Jean-Pascal, the IPCC reports actually gives us 5 scenarios of what could happen from the very high to the very low. Which one do you think is the most likely?
Well, the IPCC never answered that, refuses systematically to answer that question. And if I was speaking for IPCC, which I am not doing right now, since I don't right now have a function in IPCC, I hope to have one again one day, but that's another story. Maybe I can be a little freer to answer. Well, I'm an optimistic person. So I think we could, if we wanted, be on one of the low scenario. Maybe the very lowest scenario would be extremely difficult to achieve and to realize, but maybe not the very low scenario, but the low scenario, which would still keep us in the vicinity of slightly below 2 degrees warming above the pre-industrial, could still be realized. And we should really aim for the scenario that is the lowest one. And that means the emission reductions, which are the largest.
Absolutely. Let's talk a bit, Jean-Pascal, about the world we are in. I mean, I was born in Morocco, and then I had the luxury to travel around the world and live in Middle East, in the United States of America, back to Belgium. And I know, there is a different climate changes, right? And it's not equal across the globe. And you've been to COP26, and we've seen the president, frankly, apologizing almost, right? I mean, he did on India and China, and explaining that, the phase out is the phase down now from coal. So, but it must be different in Belgium than it does in Morocco, for instance. Can you help us and elaborate on that? And what do you think it means for global businesses?
In terms of impact, you mean, in
Yes,
terms of the
indeed.
impacts of climate change? Yes,
Yeah.
of course. Every part of the world will experience, unfortunately, some impact, but the impacts will be quite different from one location to another. In Morocco, for example, to a certain extent, you will suffer from the drying of the entire Mediterranean basin. So, as well, the southern part of Europe as the northern part of Africa, including significant parts of Morocco, will unfortunately become drier. So, on average, there'll be a decrease in rainfall. That will not take place in the same way in the northern part of Europe, which, on the contrary, will become wetter on
Mhm.
average. But what would certainly happen in common,
Mhm.
because that's happening basically everywhere, is that the intensity of rain when it rains
Mhm.
uh, has a tendency to become higher, with extremes that are higher, and that can lead can lead to floods, as we have seen this summer in Belgium and Germany, but as has been experienced in Morocco as well, by the way. So that's certainly one category of impact. But the simple fact that temperature is rising is posing problems in terms of health, because the body is adapted to a certain temperature range. The fact that sea level is rising is also affecting, and will affect more and more the countries which have a coastline, including Morocco and Belgium, even if the coast of Belgium is much shorter than the one you have in Morocco. But sea level rise will be a big problem. If we were staying on the highest scenario, we could be close to 2 meters above the present sea level by the end of this century, in the next 80 years. And then if you look further, which is very important in case of sea level, is to have a long-term view, because the ice sheets have started to melt, and they contribute in the very long term to a very significant increase. There's a novel aspect of the last IPCC report published last August, and that is, for example, in 2300, that's not tomorrow morning, but it's still a time scale. In 2300, in the worst case, for the high scenario, the sea level rise could reach 15 meter, 1-5.
Wow.
15 meter, 10 plus 5. So
Mhm.
the risks with an S associated to climate change are really very, very serious.
Yeah, and this is huge and important for companies like ours, where we used to do our enterprise risk management metrics, but climate change was not part of it just 10 years ago, and now it does. And you're right, it's not the problem of the others. We've seen with the floods that occurred in Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands last summer. We saw firsthand the effects of climate change. And I know that you personally, many of the victims in some of the hardest hit areas in Belgium. And thank you for that. So, Jean-Pascal, you just came back from COP26. Would you say that the people out there have achieved more than just blah, blah?
Oh, yes, significantly more. And at the same time, it's far from enough, and it has been more or less the same for all the COPs I have attended. And this was my 25th COP. So I've seen many of them. Um, so a lot was achieved, but it's short of what's needed at the same time. So that's very frustrating. But some progress was made. I mean, there's a clear recognition of the urgency of acting much more. Of course, the atmosphere doesn't understand that. The atmosphere doesn't understand any written, clear recognition of the science or whatever. It only understands emission cuts and
Mhm.
emissions. And the call to end subsidies for fossil fuel, to phase down coal, etc. If those calls are listened to, they should have important positive effects in the coming years. But it's really urgent to do much more.
Yeah. And as business leaders, Jean-Pascal, and this is, a topic in the C-suites these days, we've had to manage, and we have to manage a climate crisis, right? And we are most aware about what's going on the top of other crises, like in the unprecedented COVID crisis, right? And its aftermath including supply chain disruption, chip shortages, inflation, gas prices, as you can see them in Europe. Yet there is a lot of hope in this green recovery led by Europe in Europe, and there are so many opportunities for business growth. In other words, there is a very strong business case for becoming more sustainable and creating more sustainable solutions for our customers and their customers. And we've seen amazing growth in circular solution or clean mobility. Nobody would have bet on EV, and that many OEMs in Europe will just declare the intent to abandon the ICE, the internal combustion engine cars, for EV and hybrids, for instance. What's your thought? How to manage all of those evolving crises? What's about the yellow vest syndrome? Let's take care of the end of the month, not the end of the world. At the same time, we business leaders, we need to have an eye on the microscope and an eye on the telescope.
Absolutely. This is basically why I wear almost permanently this pin here, which is the logo of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which, and it's interesting, have been adopted 2 months before the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015. So these goals were universally adopted by the UN General Assembly, and the first of them is eradicating poverty, for example. The number 13 is climate action, but there's also biodiversity protection, ending hunger, education for everyone, gender balance, etc. So I think part of the answer to your question is by drawing the attention to the importance of stopping at looking at problems in silos, climate change on Monday, biodiversity on Tuesday, profits on Wednesday, and soil pollution on Thursday or whatever. I mean, synergies are really very important, and it's probably even though it doesn't look that way, I maintain that it's probably easier overall after maybe a difficult initial period to attack different problems at the same time, even if they are complex, than to attack one problem after the other without looking at the opportunities to develop synergies between the solutions to each of those problems. So that's part of the answer. So, for example, you mentioned the yellow vest. It's very important then when we talk about carbon price. I mean, we know that this will have some impact on the price of products where energy is used. There is no other way. That will increase the price of many products, at least those who at the moment use a lot of hidden carbon in their production. If the money, or at least part of the money that's collected either through the ETS or through carbon taxes or whatever, is not used by governments to help the less privileged, those who have the most difficulties to make the ends meet at the end of the month. If some of that money is not used to help them, you will have yellow vests everywhere, and you will not have support for any kind of environmental policy. So that's one example where looking at SDG, Sustainable Development Goal number 1, related to poverty, and SDG 13 on climate, or 7 on energy, they need to be looked at together, because otherwise there will be difficulty and disruption, which will finally affect everyone as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you spoke about carbon pricing, Jean-Pascal. Obviously, there is one in Europe. Are you in favor of one in the US? I mean, federal carbon pricing. We know there is an emerging one in China, but still shy, because many companies like ours, they are also, we are competitors globally, and many are afraid about carbon leakage and innovation leakage. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've worked with economists many times during my career, and I learned with them that it was one of the most efficient overall policy that you could set up, and that is to increase the price of pollution. After all, you don't care so much about something which is free or basically free. So as long as the atmosphere as a dustbin is free to use, well, nobody will care. And the more expensive it is to use that dustbin, the more everybody will think twice before putting an additional ton of CO2 or other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So yes, any policy which succeeds in increasing that price, which has been very low for too long. I know it's of the order of 60 euros now in Europe, but it's very low in many other parts of the world, is good. I was on a teleconference this morning organized by the Chinese government. So I was in Beijing this morning, and they focused very, very much on the importance for them to help them reduce their emissions on their carbon price system. So it's not only in the EU, it's expanding, and that's good. And the system also that the EU is thinking about implementing in its Fit for 55 with the CBAM, the border adjustment mechanism will help in that perspective, because it will help to create a level playing field.
Obviously, companies need to walk the talk, right, to not be accused of greenwashing and really do it. We need frameworks. We need non-financial, KPIs that are not coherent yet, between market industries and between continents. How do you think businesses can best achieve these goals from a scientific point of view and in the right legal framework?
What you mentioned about the risk of greenwashing is really important, and I think that many companies are seeing that the confidence of their customers in their product, in their activity, is more and more in many sectors related to the confidence those customers have in their declarations and their actions in the area of environment and sustainability. So it's really key. And there is, it's not only the risk of greenwashing, there is in many sectors, and I'm not targeting Solvay, we should recognize that there is a lot of greenwashing happening, and this is really bad. I mean, it may deliver very short-term benefit for those who are playing that game. It will get back to them. They will lose in the medium to long term. So eliminating greenwashing by all useful methods, by improving the reporting, the guidelines on reporting on carbon disclosure, but disclosure also on other aspects like human rights and other aspects of sustainability is really very important.
I'm going to just deviate a bit from, climate, CO2, greenhouse gas emission to talk a bit about circularity, right? And there is a lot of now attempts to look at the way we can become more circular in the way we produce, we manufacture, and we recycle. What do you think about circularity? I mean, is it something you see it as an enabler for climate change and in general for sustainability? Do you see this partnership, because we believe we cannot do it alone, how we can nurture more partnership to go faster, to accelerate, but also to de-risk projects, and how much of an impact do you think such partnership can have?
Well, it's certainly very important, but there's a but. I think we should be very realistic and honest and not make people believe that 100% circularity is possible so easily. I mean, there are limits to the number of times many products can be recycled and reused. Sometimes when I read, declarations from companies about circularity, they give the impression that they would like their customers to believe that they are heading towards a situation where there will be no impact at all of their activity, and that they will achieve 100% circularity. And talking to colleagues, experts in minerals and recycling of minerals, I came to understand that it's not that simple. And there are issues with, it's very difficult to reach very high level of circularity. So I think honesty and avoiding greenwashing there is very important as well. I think it's better to not to mislead customers by pretending that we would reach 100% circularity with no impact on the environment, because that's probably not going to happen.
No, absolutely. And I think we need to have more science, from cradle to cradle or cradle to grave type of life assessment to ensure that you're right. We can measure the recyclability or the circularity, but it's a journey. We are coming almost to an end here of this fabulous conversation. I know you have 2 young sons, and I also have a teenage son, Jean-Pascal. At the end of the day, everything we are trying to achieve for the climate is to make the world a better place for our kids and for them. What would your message be to the younger generation?
I like to start with a parenthesis. Maybe something that struck me at COP26 is the number of times the delegates at COP, the top delegate talking on behalf of their country, whether the vice president of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans, or others, spoke about their children or small children. That was striking. I mean, it was the first time it happened at such a scale from countries of all kinds. That was really striking. So indeed, as you said, what we are doing, or that what we should do, is indeed about the future of the young people who are there today and those who will come. And I think we need to tell them that there is hope, and that hope comes from action. Actually, I think it's something Greta has said, and I think she's right when she said that hope comes from the knowledge that we have, that we can act, we can reduce emissions, we can pollute less, we can go to pollution zero if almost zero if we want. We can change consumption and production patterns. We can share resources better at the surface of this planet for everyone. It is possible. So I think that's what I think we need to say. But then it's not only a matter of talking. Otherwise, it is blah, 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 quoting Greta Thunberg as well. It needs to be demonstrated that these talks are really translated in action, and that people who talk walk as well. And walking the talk is really what's needed.
And there is no better way to end this fascinating and insightful conversation than with the hope. And that hope is important, it's key. And I'm sure you will join me by saying that science will fuel that innovations which will make this hope a reality. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Jean-Pascal. Thank you. Your ideas, your provoking thoughts are an inspiration for all of us as we strive to make business both sustainable and profitable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. For more information or to listen to other episodes, visit our website. And if you like these podcasts, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, be safe.